Subramani, and let me also again welcome Mr. Alok Kumar because he readily agreed when I made this request to him whether he could inaugurate this session, and then he gave the time, and he has been nice because he is under tremendous pressure. What I will do, because this morning when we spoke, he thought that after he speaks, he would like to listen to a few. So I will cut short my own deliberation, and I will try to be very brief, 5 minutes, and then we will also have a couple of people from the expert group so that Mr. Alok Kumar has the benefit of listening to a few more people. I mean, Secretary Parr has given a whole lot of detail after responding to Mr. Sardana's very detailed presentation. And one point that came out very well, that the salient features of this scheme alone are not going to do the job, and therefore there are host of other inputs that the Ministry of Power is intending and is going to implement, including intervention by Reserve Bank of India, including intervention by the banks to see that if there are deviations, non-compliances, they are duly taken care of, and that states recognize that they will be in difficulty if there are non-compliances or various expectations. I would like to say that this scheme has, on its own, also has a lot of potential. One point which Secretary Parr has not mentioned in great detail, that this scheme also says that definitely there would be things like private public participation, there will be a scheme like franchisee, there will be a scheme like joint venture in distribution. This is one thing which has been sort of getting into background. And only thing we have done in last 20 years, one Delhi we have done, and again, Orissa has redone what it did earlier. And some franchisee like Bhiwandi was a great success. There are a few other successes in the country, and then it has stopped there. And when the present power secretary himself was the energy secretary in UP, some beginning was made, and then that was abandoned. So I think this scheme itself has a lot of potential to bring about transformation in a great way. And so long as the evaluations are done very objectively, because in the evaluation, 60% weightage has been given to the financial sustainability. And in that, there are very detailed articulations of what are the factors that would be taken into. I think I'm sure Ministry of Power would engage independent consultants or independent agencies of repute who would do the evaluation, because I remember when we did the rating of the states, we had two very independent, renowned agencies to do that. And in APDRP, we stuck to the point that several chief ministers wanted deviations, and right up to the prime minister at that time, Mr. Vajpayee, he also stood the ground, and then he said, no, there is no deviation at all. So I think evaluations, strict evaluation, objective evaluation by independent agency, and no non-compliance, no dilution. Rightly said by the power secretary that in the past there have been several schemes, but those schemes had loose ends, A, and B, in implementation there were further loose ends. So implementation is the key. We will definitely get result. We have experiences on the public-private participation of Orissa. We have experience of Delhi. We have experience and bad experience and good experience of franchisees. I think we should also target in the next 5 to 7 years that at least 25% of distribution get into one of these options. Either JV, NTPC has volunteered for JV, others have volunteered, private sector has been willing. I don't think we can have a narrative that private sector is good and therefore it has to come. No, both public sector and private sector are good. Selectively, we should try that this particular area which has somewhat remained in the background also gets into this, because retail distribution of electricity supply, as rightly stated by the power secretary, has a lot of political overtones. So the problems will be there. Our expectations are there. We will do it seriously, but there would be problems. So therefore, when we did PPP in generation or PPP in transmission, we didn't say that public sector is bad. But today also we have public sector and private sector. Transmission we opened up. We have private sectors to some extent. We have public sector generation. Even now we have only about 45-46% in private sector. So therefore, this debate of public versus private, which is good, which is not good, that is not required. We should slowly bring the ambit of private participation also in distribution that has remained somewhat neglected. So a very fascinating discussion. We heard the power secretary, we heard the presentation of Mr. Anil Sardana in the beginning, setting the tone for the whole debate and discussion. I made a few points right in the beginning, and I said that it is better that we listen to the secretaries of some of the important states. I think UP we heard Andhra Pradesh, we heard Rajasthan, and I mean, there are mixed feelings, even at the level of, though I felt that this scheme does have potential. But in addition to this scheme, if there are many other points which Power Secretary mentioned today that they are trying to integrate, but the question would be that finally, if they are not able to work it out, and finally, the issue of payment to generating companies, to transmission companies remain. And NTPC says we will not supply power. Private gencos say, how can we survive if we are not paid? Would there be occasion yet again to have discussion between state government and central government to bail them out? Because every intention, every scheme in the past has gone through this. I mean, sometimes learning out of experiences, good points have been brought in, auditing has been brought in. But the question is, if you don't perform, like Rajasthan, we brought down the loss from 14,000 crore a year to almost zero, a little more than zero, a loss. Sanjay was there with 4 years. We worked in the task force, and now again I am told that Rajasthan is becoming one of the bad ones today. The question is, politically, power is such a subject that when it comes to NTPC not supplying power and there will be sort of blackout here and there and here and there, then we start sympathizing. And why do we sympathize? Because we cannot put all these distribution companies owned by states under the same dispensation as private companies, that they go to NCLT and somebody buys them out. If you are not paying the loan, somebody will buy you out. Here, we cannot do that because these are political reasons. So it is there where we become a little weak. The finally, power sector is quite vulnerable. Whether it should continue to remain vulnerable, I can't say. If it remains vulnerable like this, then there is no future. Then everybody in the chain has problem. If somebody takes a tough step, because I made that point when Secretary was here, I have made this point otherwise also while discussing with him. I have made this point number of times with Sanjay Malhotra when he was Additional Secretary in the Ministry of Power, that look, unless a significant dent is made on the institutional reform, on the organizational reform, a mention is there, a couple of lines mention is there. But unless that is done, take for example, Haryana. Haryana as a total state is doing well, okay. But in Haryana, we have Faridabad, where the loss is in the range of, I am told, 40%. So why don't we focus on Faridabad? Why don't we focus on city X, city Y, city Z? We know that it is very difficult to touch the sensitive subject of rural area because of the so-called political economy. According to me, that political economy is a very good name branded, but political economy is nothing but nexus between political system, the staff of the electricity distribution company, and causing losses to the DISCOM. That is political economy. Political economy has been adequately covered, as you all know, in the Electricity Act. A state is free to reduce the tariff and pay the balance to the DISCOM, and tariff will remain same. If they don't pay, the consumers have to pay. So if you have in your budget the capacity to subsidize, pay to the DISCOM, but that is not done. I am aware regulators have brought out a very great research paper. Here again, the question is, regulators are trying to find fault in some of the things with the government, with the PPA, with the renewable ministry, but they don't find fault with whatever they have not done. And same is the case with other entities. So if we start trying to find excuses, on the basis of pointing out or raising fingers against others, blaming some of the actions or inactions on some other institutions, and we don't see introspect ourselves, then the regulators have their own story to say, Discom is bad. They don't say why AT&C loss is bad. They say why they have to pay fixed charges because they have done the PPA, they have to pay fixed charges. Why they have to pay fixed charges if they don't have to lift power? There is a contractual arrangement. But then why AT&C loss is more? That they don't say. Why they did not do cross-subsidy management for the last 12, 15 years? They don't talk anything. So I think these are the issues. The issue in the power sector is of work culture, of being disciplined about what one needs to do at individual level and at institutions level. So at institutions level, we had great hope from regulatory commissions. If they fail to, or if they even don't say that this is our mistake and we can set it right, try to find out somebody else's mistake, somebody else's shortcomings, and hide the whole inefficiency in the system, then we can't, I mean, we should have super regulators, we should have something else. So those are the issues in Discom. Now, as I made in my initial remarks in the beginning, it has potential to do it. It has mentioned, because even before when the scheme was being made, I had a couple of occasions to interact with also Sanjay Malhotra when he was still there in the ministry, even as REC chairman, and also with power secretary. Some points have been incorporated, but are we serious about those points? Why is it that distribution remains not even 5% of distribution in the private sector? I mean, we have seen what it means when we transform organizationally, institutionally. When we opened up this old Electricity Act and change into the new, when we have raised the proportion of private sector from less than 10% to 45, 46%, today you are enjoying the benefit of that competition. Of course, it is a pain. Competition is always painful to the people who participate in this, but consumers are enjoying that benefit. But all the benefits when this generation, extra generation has brought in, all these benefits are finished by mismanagement in distribution. So consumers are not gaining. We're reducing the price, and I often say that if we give free power to the Discom, still they will manage to make loss. And I'm serious about that statement. When we saw what was happening in Rajasthan, young, bright, young managing directors, I.E.F, 10 years, 15 years, they will say, we cannot do anything. We can't transfer a junior engineer. We can't transfer a linesman. We can't transfer anybody. They have been there for 10 years, 15 years, and political nexus between these people and our staff, they tell the whole thing, they bring the whole thing to ransom. We had a very different experience in Rajasthan of parallel distribution transformers being connected to consumers, unauthorized distribution transformers, aided and abetted by some of the staff of the distribution company. We have no control on them. So we have no control on the group, which is the cutting edge of reducing the distribution loss. We can put smart meters, we can put extra smart meters, we can put prepaid, and all the things we can do. But what happens when the meters itself is bypassed? What happens when distribution transformer is established and power supply is connected to a large number of consumers? Those are the issues which are there. It's a question of work culture. It's a question of being serious about this business, this distribution business being run in a professional manner. We have been shy. We have been very shy on touching this because it is, but we have been shy because we have become captive to our own narrative. And that's why I made that point in the beginning. Let us change the narrative. We are not decrying public sector. Many of us, most of us are from public sector. Public sector have done outstanding job. But we are saying, how can it be so lopsided? When we opened up transmission, we didn't put whole transmission into private sector. We should be proud of our Power Grid Corporation. We should be proud of some of our state transmission companies. But then bring a fair degree of proportionately so that at least there is benchmark competition, and for everybody, to the press and the media and consumers, this has to be then narrated that, look, if that is done better, why you not? We had the problem in Delhi. We had the problem in other places. I mean, somewhere things have changed. So I think those are the issues which have not been touched upon. Ministry says that, yes, we have provided it in the indicative list. I am only hoping that Ministry, PFC, REC all put together would try to incorporate some of these institutional reforms at a state level, not lock, stock, and barrel, but on areas which are really critical, areas where losses continues to be more than 25%. Selectively, I don't think we can make a case that private sector should replace public sector. That is out of question. I think those are the issues which need to be deliberated. Now, scheme, which was brought in somewhere in 2015 or so, where it was just a wishful thinking that in 3 years, the losses will reduce to 15%, but the benefit was given to the state. This time, as the scheme stipulates, that the money that is going to be given to you, either by way of budgetary support or by way of loan, and it is there where PFC and REC, they matter. Only if you reach certain benchmark performance or targeted performance. But issue, I mean, to the extent they stay on this and they hold on to this, that will work. Because instead of trying to say, I am giving you the money, desiring from you that you should perform like this in the next 4 or 5 years. That was a total sellout. I mean, just give the money and performance doesn't happen, you have nothing. Here, at least, they are predicating. Release of money, release of fund, they are predicating. But the issue is wider. If you don't release the fund, they don't give to generators or they don't do things. And finally, if the working capital is not there with them, which has been the bad story of the badly run distribution companies, then you bail them out because power supply is being affected. So that means the whole institutional arrangement blackmails on the basis of a situation where democratic government will be in problem. If power supply is not there, there will be blackout everywhere or shutdown, load setting everywhere. Then that is the situation, I think, conveniently. Those who run the discoms, particularly the staff, that is the situation they have been enjoying. It is a sort of blackmailing a politically sensitive government, democratically sensitive government. That will always be the case. But we are not seeing years after years the game plan of this staff. They say, finally, ठीक-ठाक हो जाएगा. We should continue doing what we have been doing. That is what is happening. I think consensus seems to be that this scheme, though it may have further scope for improvement, but this scheme is different and it has potential. It has potential to bring about some change. That is number one. It is unlike, say, Uday 1 or Uday 2. It is not that it is giving money in advance and expected results are later. So this is distinctly different and it does have potential, number one. Number two, Power Secretary made a point, and that is the right point, that this scheme alone is not the instrument which is going to be put into implementation. There are a number of other instruments and other actions which are going to be put into implementation, which together, like writing to RBI, like PFC, REC, trying to be very selective in deciding about whether or not to give loan, etc., etc. So these things put together. But issue which I raised was that it is very good. Implementation, strict implementation of this scheme is the key to the success of the scheme. In the past, also schemes were there, where in compliances we started diluting. We started relaxing, we started diluting. Circumstances were created that warranted dilution. Circumstances existed that politically it would have been very difficult unless it was diluted. Because this is a commodity where electricity outage becomes a problem. Mass scale outage, load shedding, mass scale load shedding, or blackout becomes politically sensitive. So therefore, you drive the whole situation to a point in a state where the things will come to a halt, and therefore the provisions, the expectations, the regulations started getting diluted. Now, that is one question that I think one will have to keep in mind. Right in the beginning, people have to be told that this is the way it is, narrative has to be changed. Otherwise, the scheme can work. I also made that point, a number of other people have made that point, that institutional reform, organizational reform is a must, not possible unless we create larger number of benchmarks. Everywhere we are only talking Delhi, Delhi. One Delhi cannot become unless there is a critical mass of an initiative being implemented, unless there is a critical mass, you can't even generalize that it will work. So therefore, I made that suggestion that can we have in next 5 to 7 years, 25% of distribution, either through franchise arrangement or through private sector arrangement or through JV arrangement. And I mentioned about NTPC and such other organizations also coming forward and be ready to become joint venture partner and try to make a change in the management. If the government gives some weightage to this and keeps the target that maybe next 5 7 years about 25% of distribution gets into one of these institutional changes and implemented seriously so that it creates benchmark. And even for example, if it is strict about implementation and no sort of vacillation on non-compliance being again ignored or condoned and then bail them out, so then we will go on bailing out, bailing out, bailing out, then it won't make much of a difference. I think some of the points which were made that there should be objective evaluation, reputed agencies, experienced agencies, independent agencies should evaluate the performance, which is the basis for giving them the fund. If that is again diluted, it becomes a problem. I made a point I remember in Mr. Vajpayee's day, chief ministers came and when we briefed the prime minister, he stood. So no, we will not relax. We won't get paid under APDRP because audited accounts do not show that you have really reduced the financial loss. They were interpreting they have reduced the financial loss. A stand was taken. But these are some of the things which will stand in the way. Let us hope, because state-wise specific action plans will be made in this. Because this has a menu of options, and what will be given more weightage, what will be given less weightage under the overall financial sustainability criteria. It will depend on the status of the state, and the state-wise action plan, obviously, the Ministry of Power with PFC and REC will make, and they will evaluate quarter after quarter, month, year after year. I think Power Secretary himself is the chairman of the committee which monitors the implementation of this. So let us hope it is yet another chance. Some of us have a feeling it will be okay. Some have a feeling that it might get into some problem. But what else we can do? We are in a system where states are not cooperating. That is definite. We can't be putting blame. It is RD distribution is not the center's cup of tea. Center took more than it could take in rural electrification, in APDRP, in distribution reform, but states are there. So I think let us be, as Ashok rightly said, there are only 6 7 states which have to be taken into account, which have to be focused, and within those states there are areas which have to be focused, and that is the way if it goes. And I understand, because I also keep discussing with ministry and with secretary himself. I think they are taking it seriously. Power minister is very keen. Private power minister is a taskmaster. He means business. I think we have a good power minister. And not that we had bad power ministers in the past, but he wants to do it. So let us hope that this will move forward and it will deliver some result. I think institutional reform is not very much off the agenda. You have seen Government of India itself deciding about privatizing distribution of Damandiu and Chandigarh. So therefore the message is very clear. The message should be clear to UP, the message should be clear to Rajasthan, the message should be clear to Andhra, the message should be clear to even Haryana in select places, and many states. There are many states where we have issues. But UP, I told the UP secretary himself that you hold the key. You set example. I think fortunately we have former UP Energy Secretary Ashok here. Of course, it's a tough task. Power Secretary himself was in UP, and 7 places were to be franchised, and the next morning that order was not issued. So I think these are the political compulsions and political realities. UP is going for election maybe next few months. Let us hope. If UP, you see a difference after the election in terms of serious implementation of this scheme, including JV, including franchisee, including private sector in distribution in select places. Then we can, within a year, sometime 1 year from now, we will know whether this scheme will deliver or this scheme will not deliver. If in UP you see the business as usual, even after election, then the result is clear that this scheme will not deliver. So with that, let me thank you all.